Dambisa Moyo, Edge of Chaos: Why Democracy is Failing to Deliver Economic Growth and How to Fix It. Welcome to a fascinating journey into the realm of economics and democracy as we delve into Dambisa Moyo's Edge of Chaos: Why Democracy is Failing to Deliver Economic Growth and How to Fix It. Understand the intricacies of economic growth and its connection with political freedom and governmental intervention. Learn how countries such as China and Argentina have navigated the relationship between their political systems and economic growth, and examine the consequences of protectionist trade policies and labor imbalances. Lastly, discover the urgent need for radical reforms in democracies to ensure good decision-making and a stable political environment.
Why growth matters. Growth is the key to economic opportunity, upward mobility, and improved living standards. Countries like China illustrate the dramatic benefits of growth, as seen in its transformation into the world's second-largest economy, job creation, and poverty reduction. On the other end of the spectrum, Argentina's past struggles with political instability and short-term thinking hindered growth, leading to economic crisis and high poverty and unemployment rates. Ultimately, economic growth plays a crucial role in shaping a nation's present and future success. Economic growth is a crucial element of a nation's progress. But why is growth so desirable? In essence, it paves the way for economic opportunities, upward mobility, and improved living standards. China serves as a prime example of the power of growth. Over the past 40 years, its remarkable expansion transformed it into the world's second-largest economy. As of 2014, China's purchasing power parity outpaced the United States, reaching $17.6 trillion, compared to the latter's $17.4 trillion. China's economic boom created unparalleled opportunities and new jobs, particularly for the rural poor. In just one generation, over 300 million Chinese citizens were lifted out of poverty. In 2013, the Chinese State Council's income distribution plan outlined the government's focus on reducing income inequality by raising low wages, boosting education spending, and offering more affordable housing. However, not every country experiences the same success in achieving economic growth. Factors like political instability and short-term thinking can derail a nation's progress, as seen in Argentina's example. In 1913, Argentina ranked as the world's 10th richest country per capita. However, between 1930 and the mid-1970s, the nation endured 6 military coups, 3 bouts of hyperinflation exceeding 500% per year, and multiple years with negative growth rates. Argentine governments neglected long-term planning and investment in education, opting to build a cheap, poorly educated agricultural labor force instead, a strategy that was far from conducive to economic success. In the 1940s, Argentina had the lowest secondary school attendance rate globally, leading to a lack of innovation and competitiveness. The repercussions of these decisions culminated in the 1998 to 2002 economic and political crisis, during which unemployment reached a staggering 25%, the currency's value plummeted by 75%, and poverty rates climbed from 35% to 54.3% in just 1 year. Managing an economy is no easy feat, but the importance of growth remains crystal clear. A focus on growth can bring prosperity and opportunity to millions, while a lack thereof can lead to strife and despair. Debt, Boon or Bane? Contrary to popular belief, debt can actually boost economic growth, as evidenced by the United States after World War II. However, excessively high levels of debt, like those experienced by Greece, Italy, and Ireland, can hinder progress and development. Alongside debt, another challenge to economic growth is the increasing global population, which puts pressure on finite resources like water and drives up commodity prices, leading to inflation and reduced living standards. Debt often carries a negative connotation, especially when managing personal finances. However, when it comes to national economies, debt can serve as a catalyst for economic growth. Take the United States post-World War II boom, for example. The country embraced massive debt to bolster education, healthcare, and infrastructure initiatives, such as the expansive interstate highway system in 1956 and the GI Bill for war veterans in 1944. Consequently, over 2 million veterans pursued higher education, and more than 5.5 million gained access to training, significantly enhancing the U.S. workforce's caliber. However, debt isn't always advantageous. It can cause severe problems when it spirals out of control, as seen in the 2007 global financial crisis. Exorbitant debt burdens in Greece, Italy, and Ireland led to declining growth, with interest payments on public debt consuming 10% of their tax revenue and necessitating a redirection of funds from crucial sectors like education to debt repayment, hampering growth even further. Another factor that can undermine economic growth is the mounting pressure on scarce resources due to rapid global population growth. From 1950 to 2011, the world's population skyrocketed from 2.5 billion to 7 billion and is projected to reach 9 billion by 2050. With finite resources like water, this surge in population will inevitably push up prices, resulting in inflation and negatively affecting both the economy and individual living standards. Though 70% of Earth's surface is covered with water, a staggering 97% of it is too saline for drinking or agricultural purposes. Growing water scarcity will likely hinder food production and hydroelectric power generation in various nations, diminishing global food markets and stunting economic expansion. Workforce woes and economic fragility. Economies face a daunting challenge as the world grapples with the dual threats of aging populations and the rise of automation. With older populations driving a decline in both the quantity and quality of the workforce, developed nations must confront the growing strains on productivity, healthcare costs, and pension systems. Furthermore, as technology renders low-wage jobs obsolete, the risk of income inequality and social instability escalate. Economies thrive on vibrant workforces, but two significant threats are embracing the world: an aging population and the expanding reach of automation. To paint a global picture, by 2050, the United Nations estimates that 1 in 6 people will be over 65 years old, a staggering increase from 1 in 12 in 2015. This aging phenomenon poses challenges for developing countries, as an older population diminishes productivity and puts pressure on healthcare and pension systems. For instance, Japan, with a forecasted 40% of its populace over 65 by 2060, is staring at potential labor shortages, decreased productivity, and economic stagnation. Similarly, the workforce quality is heading downhill, citing the United States as an example with its underinvestment in education. With American students currently ranking 13th among 35 countries in math performance, the nation faces the threat of a less competitive landscape in areas such as technological innovation. Simultaneously, the workforce is under siege as automation redefines traditional occupations. A 2013 study from the Oxford Martin School revealed that almost half the jobs in the United States are susceptible to automation, including major industries like trucking and taxi services. Job displacement due to technology is unavoidable, but the repercussions extend beyond unemployment. As automation targets mostly low-wage occupations first, income inequality will likely widen, increasing the risk of social and political instability as trust in government and economic systems erodes. As nations wrestle with the struggle of providing for aging populations and maneuvering the encroaching automation battleground, addressing workforce challenges becomes pivotal in safeguarding economic stability. Globalization versus protectionism. The global landscape shifted in 2016 with Brexit and the election of Donald Trump, signaling a move away from globalization and towards protectionism. However, protectionist trade policies tend to damage both the global and national economies. For example, the 1930 Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, which aimed to protect U.S. industries, led to a decline in GDP and living standards. Protectionist policies, particularly in agriculture, adversely affect producers in developing countries, keeping them from competing in key markets. Additionally, protectionism contributes to global labor imbalances, with developed nations facing labor shortages. Effective immigration policies, such as those implemented by Canada and Australia, are one way to address this issue. Nonetheless, navigating the current interplay between globalization and protectionist policies remains challenging for nations and individuals alike. Balancing growth and democracy. A large percentage of the global population prioritizes economic stability over political freedom, with many living on less than $1 a day. China's impressive achievements in the economic sector have been primarily driven by an authoritarian regime that emphasizes collectivism over individual rights. This approach has led to significant reductions in poverty and advances in education and infrastructure. However, too much government control in the economy poses risks, as seen in the 2008 financial crisis, which was partially triggered by the U.S. government's handling of the housing market. Emerging economies should be cautious of relying solely on state intervention for long-term growth. A staggering number of people in developing countries survive on meager incomes, making their priorities lean more toward economic stability than political freedom. In this context, China emerges as a prime example of a nation that has prioritized rapid economic growth through an authoritarian regime. With its unique blend of state capitalism, China has managed to lift millions out of poverty while enabling great advancements in housing, education, and infrastructure. Chinese secondary school attendance has skyrocketed to 94%, a far cry from the mere 28% it was in 1970, thanks to significant government investment in education. Similar efforts led to the remarkable expansion of China's highway network, now boasting more paved roads than the United States. This growth can be attributed to the Chinese government's emphasis on collectivism and control over individual liberties. Nonetheless, it is essential to recognize the potential drawbacks of too much government interference in the economy. The 2008 financial crisis exemplifies the risks associated with excessive state involvement, in this case, the U.S. government's Housing for All policy. By offering affordable mortgages and directly participating in financial markets, the government caused many Americans to take on unmanageable debt, ultimately triggering a global economic downturn. This valuable lesson serves as a reminder for emerging economies to maintain a healthy balance between economic growth and political freedom. Relying solely on state intervention, as in China's model, cannot remain a viable strategy indefinitely. Strengthening democracy's pillars. The past decade's political and economic turbulence signals the urgent need for meaningful reforms to ensure the survival of Western democracy. To fortify sound decision-making, 3 key changes are necessary. First, make reversing legislation more difficult to promote stability and encourage investment. This could involve creating binding international agreements, such as those within the World Trade Organization or NATO. Second, impose strict limitations on campaign contributions to prevent wealth from unduly influencing the democratic process, thereby prioritizing public interests over those of rich donors. Lastly, increase policymakers' salaries to attract highly skilled individuals, elevating the public sector careers appeal and ensuring competent decision-making in democratic governments. In recent years, the rapid rise of populism and economic instability has illuminated the need for radical reforms within Western democracies. Preserving and maintaining effective decision-making requires the implementation of key structural changes in the political landscape. Firstly, revoking legislation must no longer be a simple process. The ease with which policies can be repealed causes uncertainty in dealers' investment, impeding long-term economic growth. The Paris Agreement on climate change exemplifies this problem, with President Obama signing it in 2015 and President Trump withdrawing from it in 2017. The solution? Establish international agreements, like those of the World Trade Organization, WTO, or NATO security pacts, binding governments to policies they've already agreed upon. Secondly, it's crucial to limit campaign contributions, curtailing financial influence from wealthy interest groups that undermines democratic fairness. The 2016 U.S. presidential election saw an astounding $2 billion raised for campaigns, highlighting a political system where wealth eclipses the public's needs. By regulating contributions, politicians can prioritize the interests of their constituents over those of affluent donors. Finally, to attract talented individuals, policymakers' salaries should be increased, making public sector work more appealing. Currently, the significant pay discrepancy between the private and public sector detracts from the latter's attractiveness, resulting in a less skilled workforce. For example, while the average U.S. CEO's income rose from $1.5 million to $15 million between 1979 and 2013, the U.S. president's salary modestly crept from $100,000 in 1969 to $400,000 in 2001. These necessary reforms target the crux of faltering Western democracy, securing its future through lasting stability, equitable representation, and competent leadership. Transforming political systems. Revamping the political system requires addressing three key aspects: extending politicians' terms but imposing limits, setting candidate qualifications rooted in real-world experience, and introducing mandatory voting. Mexico has benefited from single, six-year presidential terms, contributing to political stability and economic growth. Requiring candidates to have non-political work experience ensures a better understanding and empathy for those facing economic challenges. Moreover, implementing mandatory voting can drastically increase voter turnout, as proven by Australia, Singapore, and Belgium, resulting in a flourishing and inclusive democratic system.
Having ventured into the world of Dambisa Moyo's Edge of Chaos, we can now appreciate the complexities and challenges of balancing economic growth with political systems and democracy. We have witnessed how China became an economic powerhouse through their unique authoritarian state capitalism, while countries like Argentina suffered from political instability and short-term thinking. We've analyzed the perils of protectionism, the impact of an aging workforce, and explored why debt can both stimulate and hamper economic growth. Most importantly, we've learned that to shape a prosperous future, Western democracies cannot avoid implementing radical reforms that promote good decision-making and long-term stability.